Dr. Snow, Chapter 2. North Pole, early evening, December 19th. A heavier snow was falling on the North Pole, accumulating quickly and steadily on the secret village. The structures were snow-white and dome-shaped, blended in well with the surroundings, and the new snow made them virtually invisible. Those who knew what to look for and where could still only barely make out the concave cluster of shapes in the winter darkness. Therefore, it was almost impossible to find them without an extremely good and recently drawn map, or better still, with GPS. Inside the main residence, it was a different world, and instantly reminded any visitor of a fairyland palace. They were greeted with elegant spiral staircases and exquisitely appointed accoutrements, paintings of fantastic scenes the size of airport murals, oriental rugs woven from the finest silks and wools in too many colors to count, sculptures of dancing sugar plum fairies and nutcracker knights looming larger than life, medieval suits of armor right out of King Arthur's court, and of course, everything associated with Christmas. The central spiral staircase led up to the penthouse, the top central portion of the dome, and this was Santa's living quarters. One half of the room was his bedroom, and the other half was sectioned off by a vertical wall, and behind the centrally located door was Santa's office and den. There was plenty of room for a large desk and office area on one side, and an entertainment area on the other, set up like a semi-domed home theater of the IMAX configuration. There was stadium seating enough for a dozen. On this particular evening, several hours after the foiled bank robbery at the First National Savings and Loan, Santa was relaxing in his red and white pajamas. He was seated in the central chair, watching the news as he sipped an eggnog martini, stirred, not shaken. His bunny rabbit slippers dangling lazy from the elevated leg rest. He was comfortable and relaxed, but the news program was starting to get under his skin. Next to him was his number one elf, Mo Tonka, dark-haired and diminutive, wearing green and white PJs with pointy green slippers. Mo was drinking hot Irish coffee in a mug the size of his head. Santa had told him he could only have one, and although Mo didn't like it, he always did what Santa asked. Well, almost always. The talking head on the IMAX screen was 12 feet tall, and she was speaking about the foiled bank robbery with a typical deadpan style of a network anchor. The would-be thieves were defeated and neutralized by an unknown person or persons, and they left a calling card on a neatly wrapped package, as you can now see. The inset video showed the bank hallway, with the 5 unconscious gunmen bound, gagged, and bowed. The camera zoomed in to show the note card. The card simply but mysteriously said, "Merry Christmas to the Chief of Police, from Santa with love." She looked into the camera with a smile. Authorities have released this information only in the hopes that a viewer will be able to shed some light on the matter. Perhaps the police and FBI have started believing in Santa Claus again, so this reporter humbly suggests that the search begin on the North Pole. She chuckled softly to herself with obvious sarcasm. Santa was not amused. Outrageous. I do them a favor and they think it's a joke? Those poor frightened people at the bank didn't think it was a joke. I didn't think it was funny as I was dodging bullets. Maybe I should have let the criminals get away with killing more innocent people. Then who would be laughing? Mo Tonka put down his mug and patted Santa sympathetically on the forearm. This world just doesn't appreciate you, Santa. They never have. You do everything you can for them, and what do you get? Milk and cookies. In other words, they treat you like a 3-year-old, and believe me, I know just how that feels. Santa smiled and put down his drink. Thanks, Mo. You have the heart of a lion and the stomach of a dragon. I'd take 50 of you to one of them, and that is not a short joke. Mo's expression was a little confused. Don't you mean one of me to 50 of them? Santa paused in thought and then replied, You're right, Mo. One of you is plenty for anybody. Mo smiled until he realized that this was not necessarily a compliment either, but he let it go before making it worse. The news program switched gears to sports, and Santa turned it off. The only sports he was interested in was football/soccer, skiing, and Formula One racing. The networks rarely covered any of that. That was what the internet was for. Santa pushed another button and an article popped up on the screen he had been reading earlier. It was about the global warming crisis and the people, besides him, that were leading the fight. He had read quite enough about Nick Saint and the millions of dollars he had invested or donated to increase global renewable energy. It seemed that a new player had entered the game as of late. Mo, have you read anything about this billionaire philanthropist that goes by the name of Dr. Snow? He is building a huge solar and wind farm on the South Pole. I don't see how that would be efficient, or how the power would be supplied to the rest of the planet, but it is an intriguing concept even so. The poles get continuous sunlight for several months out of the year and are the windiest places on the planet. So maybe this Dr. Snow isn't as crazy as he seems. What do you think? Mo took a large sip from his mug and swallowed it with joy. He was only half listening to Santa. Doctor who? Did you say no or snow? Snow, like what we have tons of. Snow, as in dashing through the. Snow, as in man, storm, bird, monster. Okay, turn off the blizzard, I get it now. Santa manipulated a joystick on the remote, and the article scrolled down to a picture of a man in a white parka wearing a white fur Russian Yusanka hat. He had brilliant blue eyes and a charismatic smile on his lean, handsome face. To Mo, he looked like a nice guy, at least at first glance, but they both knew that looks could be very deceiving. He looks okay to me, but I don't like that hat so much, especially if it's real fur. I agree, Mo. It's a gross contradiction that is saving the planet with one hand and killing it with the other. It is our job to protect all living things, and humans come last. After all, we are merely caretakers and custodians of God's great gifts. In my opinion, we haven't been doing such a bang-up job of it lately, the so-called human race. Hey, you don't have to convince me. Being as small as I am, I sympathize with all the little critters, even the big ones too. I just don't like to get too close to them. Well, my friend, I understand and sympathize completely. Santa continued to read about the mysterious Dr. Snow. It seemed he had made his billions in oil and real estate, and now was turning over a new leaf to help save the planet. It sounded a little too good to be true, although Santa knew it was possible for people to change. However, it was rare for men such as Dr. Snow to do a complete 180. Reading between the lines had become second nature to Santa. People often were not what they made themselves out to be. The more powerful and intelligent, the more likely it was that they had ulterior motives. Dr. Snow owned real estate in 17 different countries and had a claim to a large portion of Antarctica, near the South Pole, for supposedly scientific research and development. This is where his solar and wind farms were being constructed. Snow also owned a mansion in Malta, a castle in Austria, a villa in Southern California, a Himalayan hideaway in Nepal, a skyscraper in Malaysia, a denshi in Tokyo, a whole block in Manhattan, and that was the short list. He could go anywhere in the world and be at home, something Santa could relate to. Mo by now had finished his mug of spiked coffee, and he was looking limp and more than a little bored. Santa knew Mo needed something to focus on before he started bouncing off the walls. Mo had a very mild case of AVHE, a very hyperactive elf syndrome. Come on, Mo. Let's go down to the lab and find Agent Epsilon. I have a question for him. Santa pushed his leg rest down and popped out of his chair. Mo was still limp. Do we have to go now? I just got comfortable. Do I have to carry you? Mo looked hopeful. Okay then, climb aboard. Santa crouched down in front of Mo, and Mo happily climbed onto his back. Yeah, here we go. Giddy up, Santa. Don't push it, Agent Tao. You're older than George Burns, you know. So are you, Agent Sigma. What's your point? Never mind. Hold on, but don't choke me. You know I will drop you like a bag of fertilizer. A very small bag at that. Hey, no short jokes. You know the rules. Santa apologized for his breach of protocol. He rose to his feet, and they were off to see the wizard. The structures of the secret village were mostly below the surface. The domes were just the top portions of spherical structures, the tips of the icebergs. They were enormous bubbles sunk into the thick ice, designed so that if the ice cap melted, they would float away unharmed. The spherical shape made them extremely strong and rigid, like billiard balls, and they could withstand just about any attack or natural disaster. They were built to last and to float. The exterior surfaces of the spheres were maintained at a constant temperature of 0 degrees centigrade, literally ice cold, and no heat was allowed to escape from them. All internal thermal energy was recycled to provide heating and hot water, and the village appeared as blocks of ice to the outside world. It was a breakthrough on the cutting edge of thermodynamic engineering. The mostly submerged bubbles were connected by a series of tunnels that made it possible to get directly from one bubble to any other without going outside, where woeful weather wailed and spy satellites spied. The tunnels were massive cylindrical tubes like huge streaking straws terminated on either end with airlocks. The tunnels were designed to automatically detach and float away in the event of a meltdown, and could be used as lifeboats in the event of a complete catastrophe. They were also at 0 degrees centigrade, inside and out. Only the transport cars themselves were heated. The science bubble was one of the mid-sized bubbles, and to get there, Santa and Mo took the elevator down 4 levels to the SC tunnel. A bullet-shaped tram car whisked them along on magnetic levitation, and in less than 2 minutes they were walking into the main Energy Research Laboratory, or ERL, where Agent Epsilon could almost always be found. This particular evening proved to be no exception. Agent Epsilon was in his cubicle, sitting at his child-sized desk, all 3'3" of him, reading a book about climate modeling, feet up and his white lab coat unbuttoned. His shock of curly red hair stuck out at all angles, suggesting that he hadn't looked in a mirror for several days, and even if he had, it was doubtful he would have rectified the situation. He was too much of a deep thinker to worry about appearances. Santa liked that about Epsilon, and often posed questions to him that needed thorough examination before reaching his own conclusions. Epsilon had the habit of making somewhat small but important contributions to almost every mission. Santa and Mo arrived at his cubicle. Epsilon looked up with a start and cleared the considerable clutter from his desk with one swipe of his small arms. There was a loud crash as books and papers and other items cascaded to the floor. Epsilon had obviously mistaken this surprise visit for a pop inspection. Mo laughed heartily at his folly. "Nice one, Epsy! Who's going to clean up that mess?" Santa was also slightly amused, but not to the point of insults. Mo was clearly still feeling his Irish coffee. "I will discuss the tidiness issue with you later, Epsilon, but I am not here to scold you on the condition of your cubicle. Rather, do you have a moment to discuss renewables with Morris and me?" Epsilon looked genuinely relieved, and he swiveled his chair to attend to his visitors properly. Epsilon was also a man of manners. "Wow, renewable energy, but of course, Santa. That's one of my favorite topics. Would you like to see the drawings for my latest invention, the solar toothbrush?" Santa and Mo exchanged a knowing glance, but Santa kept the obvious comment to himself. "Well, maybe later, Epsy. I just have a few simple questions for now." "Certainly, fire away." Santa cleared his throat and then continued. "What do you think about building a solar and wind farm here on the North Pole to generate enough power for the entire northern hemisphere?" Epsilon looked quizzical immediately. He sat back to think. Oh, at first I thought you meant more solar and wind for us. We don't need that much, but we could always use more, but not a whole farm. Santa chuckled contagiously and said, yes, we could afford some more, but you haven't answered my question. Does it make sense to put a large investment into such a project? Would it be economically efficient or even environmentally sound? Now Epsilon really leaned back in his chair. He stared at the ceiling in thought for a few seconds before answering. Well, I would say there are better places to put it as far as efficiency goes, such as in the equatorial deserts. Environmentally speaking, it's not the worst plan because there isn't much wildlife here on the North Pole, and very few birds to be caught in the wind turbines. But the ecology, what there is very fragile, so construction would be potentially very harmful and dangerous and expensive. That being said, there is also the major problem of distribution. You would have to build an enormous power delivery system to get the juice anywhere it could be used. And the power loss would be considerable being transmitted over such long distances. That factor alone makes it a surefire loser. You could generate plenty of power, all right, but you couldn't get it where you need it. And I'd say it's a bad idea. Santa looked at Morris with a frown on his face. Thanks, Epsi. That's exactly what I thought. But I needed an expert's opinion to be sure. He turned back to Agent E. And one last question. It wouldn't be much different on the South Pole, would it? No, it would suffer from the same problems, plus the weather is even worse there. Santa grinned and nodded his head conclusively. Again, I thought so. Mo chimed in with an idea. He did that from time to time. Mo was no dummy either. What if you converted the power into microwaves and bounced it off satellites to get the power where you needed it? Wouldn't that work? Sure, said Epsilon, but I wouldn't want to be a bird or a plane accidentally crossing through that beam. It would be extremely dangerous and would cook everything in its path. Another bad idea. Mo looked at Santa and shrugged. He had tried to help. Santa smiled at them both again and said, Thanks, men. I think we can move on to the next idea. That's how progress is made. You have to throw out a lot of bad ideas before you get to the good ones. Let's go, Mo. Santa grabbed Morris and flung him onto his back. Clearly, he wanted to get to his next stop quickly, and Mo was more than okay with it. A piggyback ride from Santa was one of the best rides on Earth, and this would be 2 in one day. Lucky Mo. The next stop was 3 bubbles clockwise, and the tram ride was a little longer, but after only a few minutes they entered the super top secret doors of the Global Surveillance and Intelligence Unit, CSRU. They were stopped at 3 different check stations, even though Santa and Mo, Agents Sigma and Tau, were the most familiar faces in the village. Even so, security protocols were never breached, and passwords were changed on a daily basis. The password for that particular day was strawberry. So after being detected, inspected, respected, and genuflected, they were admitted to the big room. This place was always busy and featured a TV screen that covered the entire curved wall formed by the inner shell of the bubble. In front of the screen were multiple stations, each with its own flat-screen monitor and keyboard, in concentric semicircular rows that faced the wall, like the control room of a NASA facility. From here they tracked all of the artificial satellites in Earth orbit and covertly tapped into them, so that they could see whatever could be seen, listen in on whatever could be heard, and learn whatever could be learned. This, of course, was in violation of just about every international law written on the subject. But they were the good guys, so it was a good thing. Even so, several governments would have been outraged if they ever found out, and the Shinola would hit the fan so hard there would be no survivors. If this room ever fell into the wrong hands, it could be used for incredible evil. Therefore, this bubble was rigged to implode and self-destruct if any breach ever occurred, so that their secrets would always remain secrets. and the CSRU could never be used for evil. Santa and Mo stood at the back railing, elevated to look down upon the whole room, and watched the agents at work for a moment. It was one of the most fascinating places in the whole village, and you could just stand and stare for hours without a dull moment. The screen had a central display of the entire globe, with a coordinate system laid over it. Lights flashed and danced over the surface, showing the locations of every place that was currently being monitored. Occasionally, a light would turn from blue to red, and an inset video would jump out and take a place around the perimeter, showing exactly what was going on at the street level or inside the building of interest. The subjects would pop off the globe and their faces would appear in HD. An agent could tap his/her screen, and the image would pop up on his/her personal monitor. They saw crimes being committed, connections being made, lives being lost, the entire gamut of human activity on the planet. There were clearly defined limits as to what they could observe, and often a video was terminated due to procedural and ethical reasons. But data was accumulated even so. It was reality TV taken to the limits, often extremely funny or extremely profound and disturbing. Santa and Mo had to tear themselves away to get on with business. Santa led Mo down the left side steps and proceeded to a station in the middle where Agent Theta worked feverishly. Theta was a little person of considerable girth for his height, and was mostly bald except for a crescent of short brown hair that covered about a third of the normal range around the sides and back of his head. This made him look like a scaled-down model of a monk wearing a headset. His face was pudgy and pink, and he had a jovial appearance that was in contrast to his very serious work. Theta was always looking for an angle, but he was typically good-natured about it. Therefore, it was pretty certain that he truly loved his job. He was so absorbed in his work that he didn't even notice Santa and Mo coming towards him, a fact that was slightly ironic and amusing at the same time. Theta was very visibly startled when Santa greeted him. "Wow, Santa, Mo, nice to see you. It's a pleasure as always. What's the word?" He took up his headset so that he could attend them fully. He was a genuinely nice guy. "I have a task for you, Theta. I need to find the current location of a certain individual. From what I already know about him, he shouldn't be too hard to find. He typically leaves a trail wherever he goes." Theta perked up at the prospect of finding the proverbial needle in a haystack, even if it turned out to be a large needle in a very small stack. "Sure, no problem, Santa. Anything you need, whatever it takes. What's the person's name?" "His name is Dr. Snow." Theta immediately smiled, as if Santa had said something genuinely amusing. Well, the snowman. Funny you should mention him, Santa. We have been watching that character for a while now. He has already made it onto the top 10 persons of interest list. But in my book, he is at or near the top. Santa gave Mo a quick glance that said, "I'm not surprised." "So that means you know where he is at this very instant." Theta laughed, the laugh of a man that knows the answer to a question everyone else has been struggling with. He was almost bursting with the pleasure of prediction. "I have written a special app just for him. All I have to do is enter the name Snowman, and he pops up on my monitor." He typed and entered the name. Voila! Fish and chips. Instantly, a face appeared on the screen, and both Santa and Mo recognized him as the same man. They looked at each other in amazement, and then looked back at the monitor. Dr. Snow was dining at a restaurant with a beautiful woman at an intimate table for two. She was facing away from the camera, but her bare back and shoulders suggested a young woman dressed in an expensive dress. Her blonde hair was coiffed and curled in all the right places, and her skin was tan and perfect. Dr. Snow sat opposite to her, wearing a fine Armani suit, a diamond ring and Rolex watch that screamed, "Steal me!" was talking to his dinner companion with a seductive smile that suggested romance. He might have been proposing marriage or something just as intimate, from the way he served up his words, spread with honey. "That's him, all right," said Santa with more than a hint of derision. "Where are they, and who's the girl?" Theta punched a few more keys, and the screen split so that they were now looking at both dinner companions. She looked even better from the front, in a shimmering, low-cut champagne dress, reminiscent of Marilyn Monroe in Some Like It Hot. A box appeared around their faces with their names underneath. The tag for him was Helmut Schneeflocken, a.k.a. Dr. Snow. And for her it was Sugar Spice, no alias found. At the bottom of the screen, the name and address of the restaurant popped up. J. Mark Antony, 244 West 34th Street, New York, New York. It had all taken less than 30 seconds from the time they arrived at Theta Station. Impressive stuff. Her name was Sugar Spice, eh? I'm pretty sure I've seen her on my naughty list. "Definitely, Santa. I wouldn't turn my back on that one," said Mo with a hint of venom. It was possibly just a lingering side effect of the Irish coffee, but Mo was usually a very good judge of character, and so was Santa. "And that's a 5-star French restaurant in New York City, which I believe he owns, along with an entire block on the Upper East Side. Not that he couldn't afford to eat there. From what I know about that establishment, the appetizers start at $100. Holy hotcakes, Santa, who could afford to eat there? I'll bet I couldn't even afford the water." "Yes, Mo. You can be sure the water comes in a bottle, not from the tap, and it usually has a bit of sparkle to it. They don't do ordinary there." "So what does the water cost? $20? "Yes, at least, and there are no free refills." Santa and Mo shook their heads in amazement. Theta grinned and basked in the light of his own genius. He was still proud of how fast he had answered Santa's question. Inside his head, he was doing a victory dance. He was much lighter on his feet that way. "So, Santa, anybody else you want to gander at? Maybe a dirty politician or two? I have some great dirt on that butthead from Texas, better than Wienergate. He has his own suite of apps on my system." Theta was just beginning to roll. Oh, check this out." Santa was usually right there with him, anxious to expose any hairballs the dregs of society coughed up. But he did not have the time, and Theta could easily keep them occupied for days. He patted Theta on the round shoulder and deflected him. "Thanks, Theta, old chum, but we have to move along now. I must talk to this Dr. Snow as soon as I can to see what he's really all about. I have a very bad feeling about that one, and she doesn't exactly light my fire either." "Ha! But I bet she could set you on fire with that." Now be polite, Mo. We are all God's children, even if we do need a spanking from time to time." Mo grinned at Santa. "Don't say it, Morris. You might end up on my naughty list, too, if you keep it up." This made Mo's mouth drop to a more solemn stature. No one ever wanted to be on that list. So they thanked Theta and bid him goodbye, and with Mo on Santa's back, they headed off towards their next destination. Back in the tram car, Mo started to get excited that they were about to embark on another adventure, starting with a trip to the Big Apple. Mo loved New York City and had a few cousins there. He had once been a Broadway actor and still missed the bright lights in the big city. Mo was a song and dance man at heart, and you could never quite take the theater out of the thespian or the songs from a singer's soul. They were part of him, deep down in his heart. He loved to make people smile and laugh just as Santa did. That's why they were such good friends. As the lights whizzed past them at regular intervals, making the shadows dance inside the curvy car like the wing beats of a giant bird, Mo decided to start planning for their big trip. You think we'll have time to see a show, Santa? I have heard great things about that new musical by Steve Martin. I really like that guy. I think deep down he must have some elf in him. Too bad he's too big for the uniform. Santa stayed silent for the moment, maybe lost in thought. It was not his typical behavior, but Mo wasn't worried. Mo was too busy trying to plan the entertainment for their future trip. And that Mel Brooks one is still playing at the Broadway Theater. I have some friends in that one. They play the Dink Dinks. Still no response, or even the slightest sign of recognition. He must be really worried about this snowman character, thought Mo. Maybe I can get him to sing some Christmas songs with me. So he began to sing. Dashing through the snow in a one-horse open sleigh, o'er the fields we go, laughing all the way, ho, ho, ho. This was the part that always got Santa going, and who could resist it? But Santa was mysteriously silent. Now Mo started to worry. Come on, that's your favorite part. What's eating you, big guy? You can tell me. You can always tell me. Santa's eyes fluttered, and he stopped scratching his beard for a moment. He adjusted his glasses and looked Mo straight in the eyes. I don't like it, Mo. I don't like it one bit. This Dr. Snow is up to something, and I have to figure out what before it's too late. My Santa senses are screaming. Mo frowned and slumped into the padded chair. His elf senses were also starting to erupt. He could sense that there was something Santa wasn't telling him. Mo knew Agent Sigma better than anyone on the planet, but he decided not to push it, at least not for the moment. Don't worry, old buddy. When we get to New York, we'll beat a confession out of that scumbag. I'll hit him low and you hit him high, just like we did to that creep in Cleveland, remember? I gave him the karate chop to the stomach, and you landed a blockbuster to the chin. Yeah, pow! He dropped like the stock market on Black Friday. Now Santa looked even more serious, and Mo got a bad feeling he was about to break some bad news. He was right. I can't take you with me, Morris. It will be too dangerous. I want you to stay here and mind the farm. I need you here. I can't risk losing you. Not now, not ever. You are more important to this organization than you could ever know. No way, Santa. If it's as dangerous as you say, then I must come with you. Who's going to watch your back? Who's going to swoop in and save the day if you get captured or seriously injured? Who's going to be your safety net? Mo was beside himself with fear all of a sudden, and he jumped up on the chair so he could grab Santa by the lapels to shake some sense into him. You need me! Santa just smiled wryly and shook his head. This is one high-wire act I have to perform without a net, Mo. And I mustn't give away any clues as to who I really am. There have been rumors going around about the real Santa Claus, and security breaches have been a big threat lately. We also have to split up so that we don't lose the entire head of the organization in a single swipe. And besides, I won't be going alone. Mo opened his mouth to protest, but nothing came out. He started again, but only managed a weak butt, and then went mute once more. He knew in his heart that Santa was right, and his arguments all fell behind Santa's spectacular speeches. He flopped back down in his seat sullenly and folded his arms in protest. He would follow Santa's wishes, but he definitely didn't like it. I'm sorry, Mo. I know this is very hard for you, but it's all for the best. You'll see it later when we're all back together laughing and singing jingle bells. This made Mo smile a little, and his heart felt a little less compressed. Santa always knew how to ease his mind, even in the toughest of times. So Mo decided to be the best man he could be for Santa's sake. How his heart swelled with love and devotion. Santa was the best, and no one ever could prove to him otherwise.